The high cost of repair or replacement have made it necessary to develop corrosion protection systems like epoxy-coated rebar. Epoxy-coated rebar, fabricated to specifications, is the most viable and cost-effective corrosion protection system for new construction. In 1991, the Concrete Reinforcing Steel Insitute established a voluntary epoxy coating plant certification program. This successful program's goal is to provide the end user with a quality epoxy-coated product. Epoxy coating is applied to reinforcing bars by a fusion bonding process. During this process, the epoxy powder adheres to the steel bar as a result of a heat-catalyzed reaction. Using epoxy-coated rebar from a certified epoxy coating plant provides the fabricator with an outstanding product with which to work. In this video, we'll discuss proper procedures for fabricating epoxy-coated rebar, including material receipt and identification, storage, shearing and bending, the repair of material, and handling and loading. When you receive epoxy-coated bars, compare the identification tags on the arriving steel shipments to the bill of lading. Bar size, grade, and heat number should agree with test reports. Next, inspect all shipments of epoxy-coated rebar to make sure they've been properly loaded and secured to minimize damage. Make certain that the equipment you're using to lift the material is functioning properly and won't damage the epoxy-coated bars. Then, check all epoxy-coated bars for damage and repair. To avoid damage to the rebar's coating while in storage, you'll want to store bundles above the ground on timbers or other non-abrasive cribbing. Space the dunnage close enough to prevent the bundles from sagging. Use nylon strapping or other non-abrasive material or padding to bundle bars. If you're storing outdoors, coated bars should be covered with polyethylene or other suitable covering. Make sure that it's placed in a manner that allows air circulation and minimizes condensation on the bars. When shearing epoxy-coated rebar, you want to minimize abrasion to the coating. Inspect all the lines used for epoxy-coated rebar to assure that the contact areas are protected. Using suitable protective material, cover or pad areas on the shear line that come in contact with the coating. These include drive rolls on shear beds. To maintain shearing precision, your equipment should be calibrated according to the manufacturer's recommendations once per month. Certification of rebar that's been sheared should be documented in your plant records. Sheared length should be compared to specified length to assure that bars meet acceptable tolerances as set forth in the CRSI Manual of Standard Practice unless otherwise specified by the customer. When bending epoxy-coated rebar, cover areas of the bending equipment that come in contact with the rebar with a protective non-abrasive covering. These include backup barrels on benders. Use nylon neoprene, rubber, or other suitable protective collars on bending mandrels. Make certain that all of your bending equipment is in proper working order. Bar length and quantity should be verified to match the customer's order, conforming to bend type and mandrel diameter per the customer's specification and ACI standard bar bends. Inspect epoxy-coated rebar for damage after bending. Coating which has been disbonded from the steel should be removed and repaired. Hairline cracks as well should be repaired with approved patch material. We'll cover that next. Prior to shipping or storage of the epoxy-coated rebar, it's important to repair any visible coating damage. First, inspect all fabricated epoxy-coated rebar to locate any damage. You'll want to repair all cracks, abrasions, or other coating damage caused by handling or bending of the coated bars. Using an approved epoxy repair material, repair all visible damage in accordance with the patching material manufacturer's recommendations. Repair sheared ends using a brush or spray gun. Avoid getting excessive patching material on the adjacent sound areas of coating. When loading the epoxy-coated rebar for shipping or moving it to storage, care must be taken to avoid damage to the coating. Use nylon strapping or other non-abrasive material or padding to bundle bars to avoid damage. When you're lifting the rebar, use protective nylon or padded slings, not chains or wire rope. Make certain that you don't drag or drop bundles. When using power lifting equipment, use a spreader bar, a strong back, or multiple pickup points to minimize sag in the bundles. Place and secure the load to minimize movement during the transportation of the rebar. Avoid bar-to-bar abrasion by placing the epoxy-coated rebar on timber cribbing or other non-abrasive supports on the truck or rail car. Secure the loads with nylon or padded strapping. Finally, inspect the trucks and rail cars to make certain that the epoxy-coated rebar is very secure and has been loaded correctly. Let's quickly review these recommended practices we've covered for the proper fabrication procedures of epoxy-coated rebar. Use CRSI certified epoxy coating applicators to ensure the receipt of high-quality material. Identify, inspect, and label material to be fabricated upon receipt. Instruct inspection and manufacturing personnel on the proper care and handling of epoxy-coated rebar. Pad or cover areas of equipment that come in contact with epoxy-coated rebar, which can cause damage to the coating. Store epoxy-coated rebar inside if possible above ground and bundle with non-abrasive material to avoid damage to the coating. Repair any coating damage at each manufacturing stage. Use approved patching material for repairs following manufacturer's recommendations. Protect all fabricated epoxy-coated rebar when moving to storage or shipping. Properly fabricated epoxy-coated rebar is necessary to help extend the service life and lower lifetime cost for many structures. By following these recommended practices for fabrication, quality is assured, service life increases, and life cycle costs decrease. Further information on the fabrication of epoxy-coated rebar can be found in this reference guide available from the Concrete Reinforcing Steel Insitute. CRSI has also developed other materials about recommended ways to handle epoxy-coated rebar. Included are a reference guide and video of field handling techniques of epoxy-coated rebar at the job site, which explains step-by-step field handling procedures from material receipt to the concrete pour. CRSI acknowledges Western Coating, 3M Canada, ABC Coating Company, Stafford Video, and the CRSI Epoxy Coating Technical Committee.